Well, good evening, everyone. If everyone is all set, I will call the meeting to order with a roll call of our members. Matt Yetton, myself, present. Susan Wood.
Present.
John Christ.
Present.
Bill Lamoureux. Absent. Michael Bouchard.
Present.
Molly McCann.
Here.
Neil MacGyver. Absent. And alternates. Zach Tyrell, a select board rep.
I am here.
Excellent. Bradford Puffer. Absent. All right. We'll get started tonight with a review of the minutes.
I think they look marvelous.
I was just going to say, I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes of April 3rd board meeting.
Second?
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Extension.
Thank you.
There's Brad.
Evening.
Hi there. Good evening, Brad. Joseph, do you have any communications received?
I have a couple of communications. One recurring communication that I'll just keep plugging to the board. The Office of Planning and Development Spring 2025 Planning and Zoning Conference, Saturday, May 10th, 2025, from 8:45 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. However, it is recorded. If you want to participate live on Zoom, that's the time, but afterwards you can always watch it back if you can't make it. There's a planning board track, a zoning board of adjustment track, and a historic preservation and housing track. You can register for any of them.
And that one.
And then there are also materials like slides that will be available afterwards as well. So encourage everybody to register for that. On a similar note, I received a communication with regards to the Housing Champion Designation Program, which the board looked at previously. We've received an announcement that the second round of Housing Champion designation applications has been opened, and municipalities interested in earning the designation may apply from now until May 31st. That's something the board chooses to pursue. It's certainly something that the board could look at discussing going forward, but that is been reopened for this second round. And then thirdly, I have a communication from Chief Pierce, the fire chief that is, with regards to the BICO application for a conditional use permit, which is an update from a previous communication, more recent, received just today. So this is the most recent and updated report from the fire department with regards to that development, and I'm happy to discuss it now or when we get to that review of the application.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. See that there. Perfect. Thank you, Joseph. Moving on to applications and public hearings. So we'll start with a conditional use permit application, correct?
Yep.
Perfect. So the application for BICO LLC for a conditional use permit in accordance with section 401.1 of the zoning ordinance to permit a residential co-location development consisting of 5 two-family dwelling units and 1 single-family dwelling unit on parcels 208-097-032 and 208-097-01 at the end of Page Street, with proposed access being from Crescent Street. Joseph, do you have any comments on this particular application to start us off?
Sure, yeah, just give a little bit of background if that would be helpful. So as you mentioned, this is a request for a conditional use permit in accordance with section 401.1 of the zoning ordinance. This is that recently revised section which allows by conditional use permit for the siting of multiple single or two-family dwellings on the same lot. The proposal is to have these on 2 lots at the end of Page Street. There is also a proposal which the applicant has requested the board consider after this application for a revocation of a previously approved boundary line adjustment. And then, the access to the development would be via Crescent Street, the proposed, with a proposed secondary access from the end of Page Street. And, as mentioned, Chief Pierce did provide an update that he is okay with the development moving forward with the 14-foot gate as depicted and the 20-foot road, including the reinforced sides at grade, as well as that he is in acceptance of the 30-foot turnaround as depicted on the plan. And he has confirmed with the applicant that these conditions have been met. So he asked to provide the board with his support for the plan.
Great, thank you. Do the applicants have any comments before we get started discussing the acceptance of the application?
So I think all of, or most of you have seen us before. My name is Harry Blackie, my brother Dale, and we represent BICO LLC. In terms, certainly we have something to say about the proposal, but whether it's appropriate to do that before you consider whether to accept the plan or not, I'll leave that up to you. If you'd like to hear us talk about the plan before that, I'm happy to do that.
We can discuss to consider the acceptance of it first and then bounce it off you after that.
Okay, fine.
All right, great, thank you.
So I'm looking at the conditions for the conditional use permit, and I'm wondering about the buffer, the landscaped buffer, and if we have any information on that as part of our plan. Yeah, sure.
Please.
Good question. So the requirement is that there be a buffer between the proposed development and any adjacent lot with a single-family house on it. There are two such circumstances, and our proposal, which is reflected on the plan, is to provide a 6-foot architectural fence on our side of the property line between what we're proposing to develop and those abutters. And my brother's met with both of those abutters and reviewed that with them. So that's how we would plan to do that.
Thank you.
In the application, it says it's going to be a vinyl fence. Is there a color proposed?
It's an off-white. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but we've got a fairly extensive development ongoing up there, and we would like to continue that same circumstance. So it would be the fence would be exactly as we have currently.
Thank you.
And again, I have a fair amount. I have some things to say about this, but if you're just considering whether or not we've completed the application, I'll hold off. But certainly can answer your questions as you consider that matter.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, so because this is a residential development, we're not doing site plan or anything else like that, as long as we have the elements from the conditional use permit, it will be complete.
I believe that's correct, right?
Yes.
I agree. Yep.
So I think we can discuss some of the details. I'm not sure we're really missing anything there.
Should we move to accept it first and then discuss the details, or what's the best procedure for that?
Probably if we don't think anything is actually missing, like we have like the buffer, for example, I
Yeah.
think we can probably move to accepting it as complete and then talking about the details.
Talk about actual details.
So
Yep.
I move we
Seems a place.
accept this application as complete.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, so we'll accept the application. We'll move to discuss the approval of it. Thank you.
Are you ready?
We are ready.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, let me comment about a little historical background. And Joseph has done a fabulous job with his report to you, staff report. I'm not sure I really need to say anything because I think he's more than covered all of the issues, but I will repeat some things. Just historically, in case there's someone who's not aware. So about a year and a half ago, this board approved a self-storage facility on this property. And we had every intention of building that. And it's if for some reason the board doesn't find this proposal to be appropriate, then we'll move forward with that. But the things that have changed that have caused us to rethink that is actually work that the planning board has done. And I was interviewed by the outside consultant that you hired to review your zoning. And I know this board has put a lot of effort into creating the changes to the zoning bylaw. And we think you've done a fabulous job. And we hope that this proposal, which intends to use those changes in the bylaw, which didn't exist when we proposed the self-storage, we think it will speak good karma to the residential needs of the town of Plymouth, and frankly, all of New England is suffering from housing issues. So historically, we do have an approval for self-storage. We are now proposing this conditional use permit, and as Joseph, I think, shared with you, there's two parts to this. Because in order to implement, actually three, in order to implement and to gain approval, final approval from this board for the conditional use permit, we need to do two other things. We need to rescind a previous plan, and then the proposal is to build these units on two lots, and we need to merge those two lots. Which can be done, as I understand it from Joseph, administratively. This board doesn't need to take that action. So we're before you with respect to two public hearings. One is for the conditional use permit, and the other is to revoke the previous plan. And part of the reason that majority of the reason that we need to revoke that plan, our residential concept calls for the access to the site to be from Crescent Street, our existing development. The self-storage facility calls for the access to be on Page Street. So we need to change the plan in order to gain access from Crescent Street. So just a little bit about the plan itself. So do all of you have copies of the plan there?
Yes, we do.
Because I have some full-size plans here if anybody needs to see them.
Oh,
Does
yeah,
anyone
there's
else
one
want
right
full-size plans?
Would you like,
I'm okay with the smaller one.
you can lay,
Yeah,
I'll
I
take
viewed
it.
the
I will
full-size
take them.
plans, and I have the small ones in front of me.
you do?
Unless this is it.
That's solar.
Solar. Okay.
Here, you want?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll take one, please.
Share with me.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to.
If your eyes are like mine.
My eyes aren't any good either.
I need it to be at least that big. So just to familiarize you with the plan. North is the top of the plan. Obviously, south is the bottom of the plan. So I'll give you some a tour, if you will, using those directions. So the entrance to the property is on the east side, where you see Crescent Street out there. So we've got not a road, but a common driveway that will be on the lot to access the property. There are 5 two-family homes and 1 single-family home. In terms of parking, we have provided, there's 11 units. we've provided the required 22 spaces, and almost all of those are garages. Most units have an attached garage and a detached garage. Joseph, in his staff report, spoke to 23 parking spaces because the plan isn't terribly clear. One of those 23 is actually a turnaround for the last two houses on the west end of the property. When they back out of their driveway, they need to back into the west side of the property. So one of those two spaces that you see at the end is actually a turnaround. So there's a total of 22 parking spaces. We have approval from the ZBA to construct a fence in the front yard setback higher than 4 feet. And so there will be at least some fence that will be within the front yard setbacks from Page Street, some 6-foot fence. And then, as I said before, if you look at the southerly property line, there will be, I'm going to, as you come in that common driveway, phase 1 is to the right-hand side of Page Street. Phase 2 is to the left-hand side of Page Street. And along the southerly property line of both of those elements, there's going to be a 6-foot architectural fence to act as a visual buffer between there and the abutting single-family homes. The fire chief, we met with him earlier this year and discussed his needs. I think all of them have been incorporated into the plan based on the communication that he was kind enough to send today. We're providing a, excuse me, an emergency access off of the end of Page Street, and it's kind of faint on the plan, but it's on the northwest corner of Page Street, and you can see it's on a bias. And we did that so that if he were to have to come down there with his fire trucks, he doesn't have to turn a 90-degree angle. He can go off at a 45-degree angle. So there's a 14-foot emergency access there. We've provided a turnaround for his fire trucks down at the west end of the property. The requirement for building separation is that the residential buildings need to be a minimum of 15 feet apart for fire protection. The only exception where the residential buildings all meet that requirement. The only exception to that, there's a 2-car garage on the south side of the driveway in phase 2, if you can see that. So that 2-car garage is closer than 15 feet to the residential buildings. So we will have to provide a fireproof construction on the wall of that garage. But other than that, all the residential buildings meet his requirements. We've talked with sewer and water. All we have to do is make application to them, and we already have, or they have the capacity to provide the services. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about the plan?
Is the first, I'm going to call it parking spot and turnaround area, as you enter in through the Page Street entrance, through the gate, is that designated to be a parking spot or a turnaround area?
I'm sorry. Just after you, so just to the left, to the west of Page Street, is that one parking space you're talking about?
Yeah, sort of on the, where it comes up northwest.
So that's an additional parking space for the unit immediately adjacent to it.
Okay.
I think that's the only unit that doesn't have 2 garages. We can't put a garage there because it's in the front yard setback.
Thank Thank you.
Any other questions about the plan? Okay, so let me speak now for a minute about the requirements for approval. A conditional use permit, as I'm sure you know because you created it, the requirements are substantially different from a site plan review or a subdivision. The criteria, we have to have a minimum of 100 feet of frontage. On Page Street, we have 274 feet. That doesn't include the frontage on Crescent Street, so we're well above that. The yard requirements are 30-foot setback for the front yard, 15-foot setback for the side and rear, and we have complied with that. There's an impervious pavement and buildings requirement that can't exceed 75% of the lot area. Just as a matter of comparison, our self-storage facility provided 67% of impervious area. The residential that we're now proposing, we only have 52% of the site which is covered with impervious material. So there is a compliance, there's criteria that has to be met in order for you to grant approval. And there are 7 conditions, and I'll just speak briefly to those. For the proposed number of dwelling units, the lot meets the minimum lot area requirement under Section 304. So, as Joseph pointed out in his report, the requirement for the 11 units would be 1.49 acres once the 2 lots are combined. We have provided 1.69 acres, so we meet that threshold. Interior setbacks, access, and circulation between buildings shall meet the life safety minimums as determined by the fire department. I think the letter that Joseph read earlier would suggest that we have met that. There shall be a landscape buffer along the full length of any lot line abutting an existing single-family home, and orderly separation between dwellings. So I've already spoken to the fence in terms of orderly separation of the units. Each one of these units will have a fairly substantial, given the size of the parcel, a fenced-in yard. So there will be fairly significant privacy in the rear yard of the homes. The proposal provides an adequate supply of sewer and water, and I think the staff report that Joseph provided indicates that the sewer and water department has given us the green light, and they're prepared to provide the adequate services. There shall be not more than 1 curb cut. The only curb cut we have is at Crescent Street. There shall be sufficient off-street parking. I've already spoken to that. The requirement is 2 spaces per unit, and we've provided 2 spaces per unit. And the last one is that it's not being proposed in an open space residential development, and it's obviously not. So we feel as though we meet all of the criteria for approval. We're happy to answer questions, but rather than bore you with more of my talk, I'm going to leave it to you to ask questions as you think are appropriate.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any
I have some questions, but I also have a comment. If I can start with a comment.
Please.
First of all, I want to say thank you. I love the fact that we've moved from storage to more housing, and I think that's a wonderful thing that we could benefit from. And there's a part of me also a little bit on the less thrilled side that, and I understand we have to do that for the CUP, which is I love to see street connectivity, and the fact that this is the driveway, and we can only have 1 driveway access. There's a part of me that would love to see Page Street connected as well for more interconnectivity. But I get, for this process, you have one driveway.
We do, and one of the things here, we've met with the abutters, and they're sensitive to that, and we want to be able to do what we think is appropriate, but we also have neighbors, and we want to treat them with respect. And one of the things that we talked about in terms of traffic with when we did self-storage, we maintained, and it's absolutely the case, that self-storage has much less traffic than residential. So this proposal would certainly create more vehicular traffic than the self-storage, and that's one of the reasons why we've chosen to take it off of Page Street.
So I guess my question, though, is about the, in number 4, there's the water and sewer, which obviously we can meet. Was the regulations adopted by New Hampshire DES? And I know we had a lot of conversation about this when we had the site plan, about the self-storage, about the runoff there and stormwater and all that. And so I know you just said we have less impervious surface with this plan than that plan.
Right.
But we did have quite an extensive discussion of that problem.
About
potential
drainage.
problem on the previous site plan. So even though we have less impervious surface, I'm wondering if we have any way of knowing that it's not going to be an issue even with less impervious surface.
Okay, that's an excellent question, and we do have some. Or I think I can offer a suggestion that would help ease your mind about that. First of all, the land being adjacent to that pond has some significant history, and it actually isn't a pond; it's an old gravel pit. It was well before my life, but my understanding is that they took gravel out of there when they built the interstate. But regardless, it's an old gravel pit. And one of the things that's happened, so backspace, when this property, or the part of our original property, is where those apartments are currently. And when those apartments were created, there was, at the time, and this was years ago, there was a problem with water. The pond would rise and the water would run down Page Street, and had a negative impact on the first couple of houses on Page Street. So when that apartment complex was approved, there was a requirement to raise the grade on this property to ensure that that wouldn't happen. And so there's an outfall to the pond. And that requirement was that there be a berm built that would be, that's designed to be 2.5 feet above the outfall of the pond. And I'm reasonably sure that since that was implemented, there has been no drainage problems or no problems with water running down the street. In fact, what's happened is with global warming, if you're looking for a specific example of that in your own town, that quote-unquote pond is dry most of the year, and right now it is probably at the highest level it's been at in years, and it's still 4 feet below the outfall of the pond, which means it's 6.5 feet below, the water level is 6.5 feet below that berm, if you will, or that plateau that separates the pond from Page Street. And we will maintain that elevation so that there is a block between the pond and Page Street at 2.5 feet above the outfall of the pond.
So
Does that help?
that does help, and that's great to hear. I'm still a little bit, I still have questions about the fact there is going to be new impervious surface.
Okay.
And so the fact that that pond is not going to overflow down Page Street is fantastic.
Okay.
And I'm sure everybody on Page Street will continue to be thrilled. But there still is going to be new impervious surface, even if less so than the previous plan.
Got it.
And I am still kind of curious about that, and
Okay.
I don't know how other
Let
board
me
members feel.
Let me see if I can put some meat on that for you. So the conditional use permit doesn't have any requirements for instance, drainage design or review. It's not a subdivision, it's not a site plan review, so there's no requirement for that. But what I would offer, and I hope would help deal with your concern, is that we would invite a condition of the permit to be that that there be a drainage system which is designed by a registered professional engineer, and that once the job is finished, that engineer would certify to the town that the drainage system has been built in accordance with the plan. So
good to hear.
that's, I'm hoping that would help deal with your concern.
I think that does, but I'm actually just curious to check in with Joseph, if I may. In terms of not needing, just in terms of like our own rules here, in terms of not needing like drainage studies and stuff, which is specified very clearly in our site plan review, would the regulations of DES include such a thing if it was deemed to be an issue?
It's a good question.
It's a little bit vaguer than our site plan review regulations.
Correct.
But I imagine that could encompass something like that.
Yeah, so I would say definitely when approving a development, it's something the board can and rightly should discuss. Those specifically cited DES regulations, you know, in number 4, that 485A38 is more of a septic requirement.
Although there's an N
But it
between
doesn't-
that and the regulations.
Agreed. So those, yes, I would say DES requirements definitely applicable. Alteration of terrain would require drainage study. Stormwater pollution prevention plan at times, but there is not necessarily a default requirement in that for a specific drainage, say, drainage system designed to a certain year storm in that,
If
unless.
we recognize a
DOT.
concern that might trigger DES regulations, then, okay.
And-
And I'm not saying this is not a good solution to that, I'm just kind of clarifying our own rules.
I understand.
Yeah.
Understand. And, let me add just one other thing. So, virtually all of the impervious surface that we're proposing falls within the impervious surface of the previously approved plan. So, we're not putting new impervious surface, with the exception of one very small place where there wasn't impervious surface before.
The previously approved plan, I believe, had did it have a stormwater system?
A storm,
Stormwater system?
yes.
Yeah.
So I mean, even if it's less than that one, the other one did have like a whole stormwater system, which you just talked about, you could actually have a strategy here, so.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
I can throw it to other members of the board, I'd be happy to not take all the,
I don't mind the idea of, you know, under the condition that you have an engineer look at it after, you know, after everything's completed, make sure everything's kosher and works as it should to provide the necessary stormwater prevention that we need.
And obviously, a professional registered engineer would be aware of any requirements that existed that were applicable at the state level. So if you condition the approval on that, then hopefully we would end up with something that would meet any state requirements.
I was wondering how snow storage is going to be managed on the site.
Good question. Let's start with the part of the site, or the part adjacent to the site, which is most sensitive to the town. So one of the idiosyncrasies of this site, and specifically of Page Street, is that Page Street is a dead-end road with no legal way for trucks to turn around. So as part of the approval for the self-storage, we agreed to provide an easement over the property that would satisfy that concern. And the plan reflects, if you look at Page Street and you see before the end, you see a little kind of yellow square to the west side. So that's a turnaround, which is in part on our property. And again, if I were sitting in your shoes, I would condition the permit with a requirement for us to provide an easement for that area. Now, so that's part of the snow issue. A little bit more on Page Street. So I know when we went through the issue of snow removal on Page Street, that we need to make sure that we have a practical plan for the town to do the snow removal. So that's one of the reasons that we have kept the access, the emergency access, way over to the south side of Page Street. So that Page Street is a 40-foot right-of-way. The gate that the fire department has required is 14 feet wide. So if we take that 40-foot wide right-of-way, and we take 14 feet away from it for the fire department, then there's a significant snow storage area, because there's no reason for anybody to go all the way to end of Page Street. So there's a significant storage area there for snow that will be available to the town. So that speaks to the access for emergency and the town's ability to quote unquote store snow at the end of Page Street. In terms of our site, so one of the miracles that we've recently became aware of and used this winter, incredibly successful. We have a piece of equipment that's got a huge snowblower on it, and we used it this winter to provide snow removal for 30 some odd units in our development. And one of the great things about that is we can aim that thing. And we can put snow places where you couldn't plow it to. So the answer to your question on site, we will be using the green and landscaped areas to do that. And like I said, it's made a huge difference to be able to put snow where you couldn't do it with a snowplow or even with a front end loader. And I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does a lot. So you're talking about the development over on Crescent Street.
Correct.
Okay.
But we'll be using the same equipment
Same
here.
equipment. Okay. Thank you.
I have a question, if I may.
Please.
Is this development also going to be 55 plus?
No,
It is not, okay.
it isn't. And I'm glad that you asked that question, because it gives me a door opening to share something else that I wanted to share with you. So one of the things that we've learned from the development that we've done, and I think came out in your housing study, is that there's a very wide range of housing needs. We've satisfied a significant portion of the over 55 need, and I think our development alone has probably built more housing in the last 2 years than the entire rest of the town, and that says that that we're in the process of satisfying a need. But we know that there are other markets. We know that there is a young family market. We know that there are families in their 40s and 50s who are ready to move up, or have had children and need to move up into a larger home. So what we've done is we've developed a product here that allows us to put all the foundations in without knowing what kind of house we're going to put on them. So, and we have three options. We can do a single-story unit that would be appropriate for a single individual, either a young person or maybe an elderly person. We can do a story-and-a-half unit that would backspace, so that single-story unit would be a single-bedroom unit. We can do a story-and-a-half, or what is typically referred to as a cape, with 2 or 3 bedrooms for younger families who might be anticipating children or have already children. And we can do a full 2-story unit with 3 bedrooms upstairs and take that bedroom on the first floor and turn it into a den or something like that. So we think, so the answer to the question is no, it's not going to be over 55, but I wanted to share with you our thinking about the marketability of this and in the different housing segments that we're hoping to be able to satisfy.
Thank you. I was in part asking because of accessibility issues, but it makes sense in that regard as well, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I have another.
Long-winded answer to a short, easy question.
All right, I keep asking questions. I'm sure, I think we've had this conversation before. I'm sure you've thought about like ownership models with this kind of plan. And so I guess you have a plan for this going forward. Is it going to be rentals, or how's that going to work out?
We
Or are you going to sell the individual buildings within the?
Yeah, so again, that's a good question. So our model in the Crescent Street area has been that we are selling homes and we are leasing the land. And one of the reasons that our development has been so successful is because what that does is it significantly reduces the sales price because they don't have to buy the lot. And in today's market, the percentage of the total cost that is represented by the lot is getting higher and higher. So that's one of the reasons that our development has been successful, is because we've been able to reduce the sales price by eliminating the upfront lot costs. So our plan is to continue that model. We would sell units and the lots would be leased, and included in the lease payments would be landscape maintenance, snow removal, trash, real estate taxes on the land. We're using sprinklers, lawn sprinklers, that, by the way, we're drawing the water. We're not using town water for that. We're using a well system. So that's another thing that we've had confirmed by Crescent Street, is that there are so many people, whether it's somebody elderly who can't do those things for themselves, or a family with 2 working members who doesn't have time to do those things. So the approach has been very successful at Crescent Street, and so our intent is to continue that model.
No, partially I'm just really kind of curious how this conditional use permit is being used, and it's interesting to see.
Yeah.
Will these be stick-built homes, or will they be modular homes, or?
That's a great question, too. What we have been doing on Crescent Street is manufactured homes. These will not be manufactured homes. They will either be modular or stick-built, and possibly a combination of.
Thank you.
If you don't mind speaking to the road, I'm slightly concerned about life safety and apparatuses getting back there, and I do understand that the fire chief has signed off on it and he's okay with it. And I just have some concerns that
Sure.
with a 16-foot roadway and a 20-foot subbase, but 4 feet being, the loam and seed, as well as the size of the turns. Can you speak to that at all? I think they're not adequate.
Yeah, I can.
Extremely
We,
problematic.
yeah, I can. We had originally proposed a 12-foot, remember, it's not a road, it's a driveway.
Thank you, driveway.
Yeah. So we had originally proposed 12 feet. The fire chief said, you got to give me 16. That was, but, to his credit, he wanted to make sure that his needs, the town's needs, got satisfied, but at the same time, he was concerned about the appearance And so what he proposed was that we, in addition to the 12 feet of pavement, that we provide a 4-foot section that would have a road base but could be green on the surface. And the fact that we've got, an emergency exit onto Page Street. We've provided 2 parking spaces for each unit, so we won't allow parking on the driveway.
So the fire never asked for 20 feet.
No, they never asked for 20
And
feet.
they actually, and fire suggested a 4-foot.
Correct.
Shoulder that's stable enough.
Right. They wanted
That
a
was all
16, they wanted a 16-foot surface that they could get their equipment in on. And, I'm sorry, because the other requirement is that we have to make sure that there's snow removal for that 4-foot section.
What does that look like? I know when the ground's frozen,
Yeah.
no big deal, right? But what happens like during spring and fall?
Good question. You mean in terms of snow?
Yeah, so on that 4-foot shoulder, right, no big deal on the pavement year round, but during this time of the seasons, like when it's softer.
Yeah.
what do you do
So
for
that's a good question, too. So underneath that 4-foot section, there's going to be the same gravel base that's going to be underneath the pavement. So for stability. And then a thin layer of frosting on the top in terms of loam. It seems like there was something else I was going to say and it slipped my mind. Sorry.
That's fine.
Oh, I know. So, snow removal. So again, the magic machine, if we tried to plow that, for early storms and late storms when the ground wasn't frozen, we'd just rip it up. But with the snow blower, you just pick it up an inch and it takes care of the problem. I hope that helps.
That does, yeah. And I do understand this is a driveway, and I just see concerns, even though it's a private driveway, I see concerns with one apparatus going down there, and then a second apparatus going down there, and then that's it. And then it's already shoehorned.
Other driveway is a little bit more similar to what we typically see in a commercial driveway,
Yes, yeah.
where you're accessing multiple. Yeah. I mean, for me, as long as fire and life safety says we're good, and
Yeah, I personally think it's problematic. I don't see this working with a fire truck turning around. And I understand the shoulder and the lighter area is gonna be supported by the base.
Let me
But
see.
if the fire chief, if the fire chief said he's good with that's, certainly his profession and not mine.
Let me, because of the words that you just used, truck turnaround. So at the end of this dead-end driveway, if you will, at the request of the fire department, we have provided a 30 by 16 turnaround for his vehicles. We had one there just for cars. He asked us to enlarge it significantly. We agreed to do that.
And actually, one more clarification. And in an emergency, the Page Street connection would be available?
Say that again, please.
In an emergency, the Page Street connection would be available?
Absolutely. That's why it's there. So that will, we will have a gate there, and we will provide whatever means of access the fire department wants.
It'll only be available to phase 2, and especially
No.
if there's excuse me one moment, especially if there's a car park there, there is no way an apparatus is going up to phase 1.
From Page Street.
Well, hopefully there won't be a car parked there, but
No,
But it
well,
shouldn't
that's
be.
a parking, no, that is a parking spot.
That's what that is.
which one?
Right here.
Well, this is a parking spot, but
Yeah.
but the Page Street connection is not.
Correct, yeah,
Yeah.
but there's no sensible way to bring a piece of equipment to the right.
Oh, to the right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, to phase
Phase
1.
1.
As a man who drives a fire truck, you understand that.
Say that again, because maybe I can help.
Yep, so please, so I think the Page Street, I think the Page Street access how it cuffs off to the northwest allows really nice access. Actually,
Phase 2.
not really nice. It allows access
Right.
to phase 2.
Yep.
I do see, and I know there was no stipulations or requests for this, just a thought that I do see that if an apparatus had to work phase 1, we'll say,
Yeah.
had to either come out onto Page Street or get in from Page Street, I don't see that as an easily feasible thing.
Let me see if I can help.
Thank you.
So there's a proposed fence along the end of Page Street on the plan, right?
Yep.
And there's a proposed fence that separates Page Street from the buildings to the left in Phase 2. There's no reason to put that fence in until we start Phase 2. So what that means is that the fire department would have full access to the end of Page Street, a 40-foot right-of-way, which would allow them to make that right-hand turn. Or to come in on Crescent Street and turn and go out on Page Street.
Let's make that swing.
Yep.
Yep. Actually, that leads me to my next question. Thank you for noting that. When you do phase 1, say phase 1 is complete and you haven't yet started phase 2,
Yep.
and it sounds like this is exactly what you're talking about, it'll come to Page Street and end there. So phase 1 will have, once again, limited, just through gated, but phase 1 exists, phase 2 does not exist, but that Page Street emergency access is still there.
Correct.
All right, thank you. Perfect. Does anyone else have any questions?
Well, on phase 1, the turnaround area, how deep is that?
The turnaround area.
Right, for safety vehicles, life
Okay.
safety vehicles.
You're talking
is it-
about the thing that says turnaround area.
Correct.
Okay, that's not intended for fire vehicles. That driveway is so short that that driveway is like the driveway on many homes in this town. When we build a single-family house, we don't put a turnaround for the fire department at the end of it. So there is no there is no proposed turnaround for fire trucks there. In fact, there wouldn't be any way for them to get into that, because if they drove on that driveway all the way as far south as they couldn't, even if that turnaround were larger, a vehicle couldn't turn into that. Am I making myself clear?
Yes.
So this is like if a fire truck pulled up to a house with a long driveway, they'd probably end up backing out again.
At most of the houses in this town. Correct.
Does anyone else have any questions on? Yes, Molly.
I have a question for the board, actually. As I'm looking at the conditional use permit requirements, the 7 line items, and I'm looking at number 3, and I'm wondering what the intention between talking about internal landscaping, does a fence count as landscaping in this case? Is that the intention, or was the intention plant life? Just want to know what your thoughts on that are.
Right, the landscaped buffer. Does
Right.
a fence satisfy that?
Correct.
I wrote myself a note about saying
Did
that.
you?
That's a great question, because I feel like the intention is there.
I
for
can,
that.
I can shed some light on that if you'd like.
Sure.
I know you said it was a question for the board, but
Yeah, because they wrote it, so I was
yeah,
asking
I
that.
get it.
But, yeah.
So here's the issue. That property line on the south side of our site is, on the abutter's side, is heavily vegetated.
Mm-hmm.
We could plant anything you want in there, and it ain't gonna grow. Because it ain't gonna get any sun.
Yes.
And it's not gonna get watered unless God does it.
Okay,
So we know the fence will work.
that's good.
We know that it's a better solution than a green border.
I was thinking a little bit more about the internal between neighbor and neighbor rather
it.
than that border fence.
Okay.
I see the vegetation and I totally understand that. And I don't necessarily have any objections in this particular case. That's why I was asking the
Got it.
board what their intention was
Yeah.
with writing that. Is maybe that's something we can clarify moving forward if a fence counts as landscaping, or if by writing landscaping in this, the intention was to have plants.
We certainly intend to have plants in the front yards of these homes, and the rear yards will all be private fenced yards that will, whatever happens in there is a function of, just like at your house, you get to decide, I assume you get to decide what you want to plant there.
Yes. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, concerns before we go to public hearing?
That's an interesting question then. So the leased land includes the backyard as well?
Yes, they will have, it will be what's referred to as an exclusive use area.
Okay.
So they won't actually own that land, but they will have the exclusive use of it. Just the same way, we have those same fenced-in yards at our current development, and these will be substantially larger, but the same concept.
Is it the same in the front yard, or is that common? I'm just
Say that
curious.
again, please?
Is it the same in the front yard, or is that common?
No, that's common.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it doesn't really matter for the application, I think. I'm just kind of curious.
Yep.
Great curiosity question. Well, if there's no other questions, it is 7:26, and we'll open this up for public hearing. Thank you very much for your time so far. Do any members of the public wish to speak upon this application? Please step up to the microphone.
State your name.
My name is Donna Patton, 25 Page Street, Butter. When this was before the board for the storage units, the question came up, was there deed restrictions on that property? I gave the board at that time copies of the deed restrictions, and a copy was also passed to their lawyer. I didn't really read through all of the deed restrictions because we were limited to 3 minutes, but I handed it off. Number 1 is drainage and fence easement. BICO, as owner of a parcel depicted upon the aforementioned plan of Lot 2 containing X number of feet, also grants to Plymouth Woods as owner within the conveyed premises the perpetual rights and easements to enter upon the westerly portion of Lot 2. So there's easements there. There's drainage bridge easements. Number 2 is, with Plymouth Woods with the conveyed premises. There's exceptions and reservation of certain rights within the drainage berm easement area. Number 3, and the parties acknowledge and agree that it is their intention of the 15-foot drainage and fence easement in the proposed drainage berm easement area shall be stated prior to any clearing occurs, and states that shall remain during the process of construction to the extent it is reasonably practical. And I'll give you guys a copy of this again. I only brought 1 copy. And number 4 is a vegetative barrier. And number 5 is erection and maintenance of common fence. And there's a part in here that the town, certain rights accepted and reserved to the town of Plymouth, New Hampshire. And so I just wanted to bring that back to your attention, that this is out there. Last time when they were doing the storage units, they did come down and do a site walk. You might want to consider doing that again for this project. So I will put this on the table if anybody wants to skim through it. As a matter of time, I was going to read it all. And so if you want to skim through it. So those are our concerns. Of course, we have the concerns about the water table, and we did ask him at the meeting the other night, if they'd be doing the pits or whatever they were going to do before. And he said, no, it wasn't required. So I'm glad that you're going to talk with the engineer about that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Can I ask a clarification question for
Please.
Joseph? So Joseph, if there are currently easements to be dealt with, would that be a private civil matter?
Generally, The answer would be yes.
And that the board can't really consider, but should be
The
a conversation
applicant
that happens
should
beyond
cer-
here.
Absolutely, yeah, and, also all valid points of conversation, and of course, the board has to make its decision on the basis of the regulations, the facts, the case, but, it's important for people to be aware if these do exist, and certainly if there is anything that is, was imposed directly, by the town, for example, a plan note on a previous subdivision. But yes, and often they are enforceable by the parties to that particular easement or deed restriction.
If you need any insight on that, please, I'm happy to provide.
If you wouldn't mind speaking to it for a moment, if you have some information off the top of your head, it might help everyone. Thank you.
So the apartment complex next door, we sold the land to them. And when they got their approval, that's when there was this concern about water traveling down Page Street. And so as part of their approval, what we did was we gave them an easement to build, because this property obviously wasn't developed at the time, and we wanted to create this dam that would provide an extra layer of protection for the Page Street residents. So we gave the apartment complex an easement which allowed them to raise the elevation of a strip along the pond, and we gave them the permission to come in and maintain that. The other thing, she mentioned fence, and that's absolutely true. There is a fence along the property line between this site and the apartment complex. And they were kind enough to do that at our request, but the fence is on our property. And so we gave them an easement not only to install that fence, but to maintain it. So the easement was granted to the adjacent apartment complex is the answer.
Okay, thank you.
Those easements wouldn't change with this development of the site.
They should not.
Shouldn't. No.
And if the development of the site were to affect the easements, it would be still a matter between
Okay.
the two parties.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or members of the public that wish to speak before closing the public hearing?
Is there anybody
All
online?
right. I'm sorry?
Anybody
Online.
We actually don't
Anyone
have
online?
anybody online.
Wow.
All right, well, it is 7:33 and we'll close the public hearing.
I can't remember if this was in the staff report. It looks like is that the property line that comes down into the driveway? Like kind of,
We're
there's
very
a little
close
point.
to.
Phase 2 where they'll,
Yeah, right here, like where it dips down,
you know,
a little right angle. And I'm just kind of curious about like setbacks and that kind of thing. Sure.
The zoning setback is mentioned.
You're referring to that triangular piece that kind of comes in close to the, okay. So first of all, we own the property on both sides of the property line. And the requirement is that, so that's a side yard or a rear yard, depending on your interpretation. Rear yard. I've talked too much tonight. So the zoning requirement is that we have to stay, the buildings can't be closer than 15 feet to that property line. So all of the buildings are a minimum of 15 feet from the side and rear yards.
Driveways?
Driveway.
No?
No.
Joseph?
No, parking spaces do require a setback, but actual access ways, driveways are not traditionally treated as
Okay.
being subject to a setback,
Thank you.
unless it's a designated parking space.
And so it like just touches it basically, the driveway, without actually encroaching over it?
I think depending on the size of the line.
I think the line's pretty
Depends
big.
on
The
what
I
line's
think the
side.
very
line's
big.
wide.
What side of the line we're going
Yeah.
on.
Okay.
It's very
Well-
defined.
We'll stay on our side of the property line. And if we need to, we'll give ourselves an easement.
Fair enough.
If need be, I think that will be easy for the future.
Yeah, okay. Just checking.
Does anyone else have any other questions before we go into finding of facts for this, or any other things we might want to consider? Right, snow management, stormwater fencing. Would we want to request an escrow account for engineering review?
I would say yes. For a drainage study or a drainage plan.
So there's going to be the drainage that you're gonna bring in an engineer for,
Yeah.
and so the question is whether or not we'd bring our own engineer in to double check that.
Oh, I see.
I think we should.
Okay.
Because under the assumption that the plan brought forward by their engineer
Yeah.
is satisfied and
It's fine.
up to snuff, I don't think it's a big
Yeah.
hurdle to ask.
Can I just make a comment?
Please, yeah.
I mean, I
No, no.
don't mean to interrupt with your process.
No, not at all.
One of the things that I think you were trying to accomplish when you wrote this bylaw is that you were trying to some degree, simplify the process. I don't have to tell you, not only when people are proposing developments in this town, is it a huge effort on your part, like being here tonight away from your families, but it's a huge impact on us. And so, one of the things that I think you have done with this permitting process here is to not only to simplify the process, but hopefully still get the same results. Because what we've been doing in the past, what we do, or what you do with a subdivision or a site plan approval, typically for a much bigger job, is you require the developer to pay for the design process twice. Because he's got to have an engineer who designs it, and then the town's engineer has got to do the same analysis and the same report and effectively design it himself to make sure that the other design is correct. So I'm hoping in this case that you could be satisfied with a single design done by a professional engineer who would certify to the town that the plan meets all of the requirements, drainage requirements, and that when the work is finished, that he's certified to the town that it had been successfully completed.
No, I understand it's an additional cost, and I sympathize with that, I really do. I think back historically to when we've had plans put in front of us from licensed professional engineers that don't follow our guidelines and aren't up to state regulation. And sometimes it's as easy as there's a shed in the setback, and us on the planning board can easily pick that out and make light of it. Where it becomes concerning for the protection of the town is that I'm not a professional stormwater engineer. So when, and I don't know if neither Joseph is, so when the final plans are submitted, and it's not to distrust or doubt your professional engineer, but it's thinking back to, we've been given plans historically that aren't correct, and whether that's malintent or just an error on the submittal, it makes me concerned that who's gonna be double checking
I
it.
certainly understand that, particularly when it relates to land like a subdivision where ultimately the intent would be that the town would take ownership of that. I would think, just as it is in your subdivision regulations, there's a requirement for the town to have an engineer who reviews and approves the design engineer. But we're talking about a piece of personal property here. We're not talking about, I mean, when we build a single-family house, this is a single-family lot that we're putting, single and two-family houses on. if that same piece of land had a single two-family house, you wouldn't have an engineer's design, and you just wouldn't go through any of that. So anyway, I'm not pushing
Nope.
back, I'm just.
No, it's a good point to make. Yeah. Thank you.
I do respect what you're saying, and there's a lot more out there. And if something goes bump in the night at some point in time, people on the neighbors, the people in there, the first place they're going to go when they don't get satisfaction from you is they're going to come here. So we have to be able to justify what we said. So that's a lot of the reason also. We try to cover ourselves with that.
And if I can add a little bit more kind of clarification. So on the one hand, I mean, you're right, for residential development, that's not like large multifamily or large subdivision or something. We don't go through site plan review and all these things that we're talking about right now. At the same time, we did put in here DES regulations, and you mentioned it being your private property. I mean, the reason we look at stormwater is because the stormwater on your private property or anybody's private property on a larger development might run off into somebody else's private property. And that's why we, look at stormwater. If stormwater always stayed on your own property, we wouldn't care. But the problem is it might go onto somebody else's, and that is why we care. And so you could have a single house on here which would be not subject to some of this. But this is a more substantial development, and I'm really excited to see a more substantial development. But that might require, if I'm hearing other board members correctly, a bit more oversight as well. And I'm willing to defer to others on how much of that oversight we want, but.
Yeah, it's not just a two-family, and it is still on, 1.69 acres, so it's not a large lot, but I think it could have the potential of impact, and just want to make sure it's being protected. Yeah.
I understand your concern. I think I could be willing to support your concern as long as it was limited to drainage. I mean, the building inspector is going to inspect the buildings. The water and sewer department is going to inspect the water and sewer. So what I'd like to try to avoid is an engineer having to inspect everything that we do out there. So if the concern is that drainage is kind of a special issue, and the board felt strongly that they wanted some oversight by the town's engineer, I won't lose any sleep over it.
I think that's what we're talking about, is looking at the
Stormwater
is looking at the plans for the stormwater.
Yep.
And we're not talking about broader inspections or inspecting the entirety of the plan by an engineer. I think we're just talking about the stormwater plan.
It's just
That
really
was
water.
my intent with that, was that
Yep.
your plans you submit to us at the end with, this is our stormwater and drainage, this is what we ended up with, the
As-built.
as-built, thank you, is that our engineer just runs through that and says, yeah, this all works, yeah.
Yeah, if you want your town engineer's approval of the as-built, you can live with that.
Yep, that's, I think, satisfactory, yeah.
So the one thing I'll mention is that typically if we ask for engineering review, we continue a application just in case the engineering review does come back, which it usually does not, but just in case it does come back with a problem, that the board can still review and respond to that problem without a conditional approval already in place.
How does that work if our review is of the as-built, though?
Would it, the review be of the as-built, or would it be of the plan?
I think we want them to review the plan,
Okay.
and then just, when they do the as-built should be fine if he reviews the plan, and would we want inspections for that, throughout that thing? Or, and just present the as-built, but I think he needs to review the plan, because if you install it and then you give him the as-built and he says, that's not gonna work, or I don't like that,
I'd be okay with not doing the inspections necessarily.
and that's fine.
If we had an approved plan
Yeah.
that we had a review of.
Yep, so I would say the plan, and
Yep.
then, just be sure we get as-built.
Please.
Like I said, I won't lose any sleep over that.
Okay.
Okay,
You're
so that's
comfortable
okay with you. Thank you.
And I was making the point that typically, we would continue a hearing until we get our engineering review back, just in case there are any issues.
I think would be satisfying.
So, which raises timeline issues, because we'd have to have a plan from you, which would then get to our engineer for approval before our next meeting, perhaps, unless we wanted to push it off, and I don't know what kind of timelines you have.
When did you want to get started?
It's spring.
It
When
is.
did you want to get
So
started?
let me speak to that. Would it not work if you make your approval contingent upon the submission, the approval of our drainage plan by the town's engineer?
So typically we don't, for the sole purpose, and I don't think there's ever been an issue in the time I've been on the board, but in case our engineer looks at it and says, no, this is not okay,
Yeah.
once the conditional approval is in place, then the board has no recourse unless we could make a condition that we have a compliance hearing if it comes back with a negative review.
Yep, we could put
Yeah.
that in there.
Sounds like a great idea.
Okay.
Do you have a drainage plan at this point, or do you have to have that done?
We would think of doing that without your approval.
So you haven't done it yet?
No.
Okay, so that's time too. So, yeah, that's,
So we could just do
I could do that.
a compliance hearing if it comes back with any problems. And if it doesn't, then it's conditionally approved. That sound, that would work out, Joseph?
That's fine, I mean, obviously, with a typical site plan or subdivision, the board might handle it differently, but this is a different type of approval, it's a different type of permit that's being issued, so I think that seems reasonable. And what the board did with the hotel development recently out at Riverside Landing, Phase 2, the Home to Suites by Hilton project, the board essentially did what you're describing, John, the conditional approval with the condition saying the town provide funds in escrow for the town's engineer to provide a plan review. The applicant shall address any comments raised by the town engineer in their review. Something to the effect of, if any of the comments cannot be addressed, the applicant should come back to the board for a compliance hearing.
Okay.
Okay, so we can carry on that same wording.
Yeah.
That works.
And then with this one, you just want to add at the beginning that it's specifically the applicant will provide a engineered drainage plan prior to the start of development for review, provide the funds in escrow for the town's engineer to review and approve the plans. Applicant shall address any changes requested by the town's engineer. Changes will not be addressed. The applicant, or a compliance hearing shall be held.
And it's okay when we're going through conditions, we say, like Joseph said.
As long as you say which thing that I said. in detail.
I'm trying to write it down as quickly as possible.
Well, are
Any
we ready
other
for
conditions?
findings of fact, or?
I think we are. Well, let's discuss findings of fact.
So I think we're gonna just go through the 7 points here. So finding of fact, for the number of dwelling units proposed, we meet the minimum acres, which is 1.49 minimum, and they have 1.69, I believe it was, acres. And those numbers check out, Joseph, yes?
That's what I have to.
Sounds accurate.
The internal? Interior setbacks, access, and circulation between the buildings have met the life safety minimums as determined by the fire department, and we have confirmation from fire chief that those requirements have been met.
With the note that one garage will still be met, but without setbacks, it will be met through fireproof construction.
Correct, thank you.
As required.
That's correct, yes.
and the fire chief also had them change that turnaround from 20 feet to 30 feet, and there will be a 15-foot area that's grassed over with the surface underneath that. So that's all set. water, sewer is all set.
Okay, we have a buffer in the form of a fence and, between, other residential properties.
There has been one curb cut made to Crescent Street and another one from Page Street to the driveway, which is compliant with the life safety requirements.
There's sufficient off-street parking on the lot for each dwelling unit to comply with the minimum parking requirements for single-family or two-family homes.
And the applicant is proposing 22 parking spots, it was, correct?
Right.
Thank you.
And finding a fact, this is not an OSRD.
That's correct. Good job, Joseph.
Thank you, Joseph.
That leads me into a question, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Joseph, none of this proposed land to be built on was open space that needed to be open space for the first OSRD. I think back in 2006 was to work, correct?
To my knowledge, all of the open space required for the first open space development was on the property to the north of this with the pond. If the property owner has any different knowledge than that, certainly let me know, but that was my understanding.
Yeah, there's a specific lot, which is 50 acres or something like that, which is relatively adjacent to these lots. It's designated as open space.
And none of that open space is, the access to that space is being blocked by this new driveway.
No.
Perfect, thank you. All right, does anyone else have any other finding of facts? I think that should satisfy that.
Yeah.
Perfect. On to conditions.
I want to make a motion. It'll be a fun one.
Should I try it?
You could list out conditions first if you wanted to before making the motion, and then.
Okay,
the zoning
so
board sometimes does that.
So let's see if I have this right. Our conditions are that the applicant will provide a drainage plan, as well as escrow for review from the town engineer of that drainage plan. The applicant will address any comments brought up from the engineer about the plan. And if any comments cannot be addressed, the applicant will come back for a compliance hearing. If all comments are addressed, then the application is conditionally approved,
As long as everything else is.
as well as everything else inspected.
So,
Another condition should be the approval of the revocation of the previously approved boundary line adjustment.
yes,
Zach? Yes.
it should be.
Do we need to do a development agreement?
Never a bad idea.
Joseph,
to
do you have
have-
any suggestion on that?
Yeah, it's never a bad idea to have a development agreement, especially if there's also going to be some type of escrow. The development agreement itself doesn't cost the applicant any money. It's just, the applicant and the town making clear who's responsible for what, under the various circumstances. It acknowledges the conditions that were placed on the approval. So the development agreement itself, there's not really much of a downside to it. Since it in and of itself, unlike the escrow, doesn't actually carry a cost. It's really just a agreement between the developer and the town outlining roles and responsibilities.
Okay.
Could I just ask a question about that? So if you decide to include a condition about a development agreement, and Joseph, I guess I'm addressing this question to you based on what you just said. So would the development agreement speak to any issues other than the issues of approval?
I can go over a little bit of the development agreement if you'd like.
No, not necessarily.
I'm happy to. It generally, let me just pull up an example here real quick. It won't take long, so I can speak to that in a little bit more detail. So the development agreement in general lays out the approval that was conveyed by the planning board, conditions that have been placed upon the planning board, The applicant agrees to comply with the regulations applicable and obtain all necessary permits, comply with the plans as submitted to the board. The applicant acknowledges their responsibility for the quality of the construction. The applicant is responsible for erosion control. The applicant is responsible for if during construction any off-site issues are caused, applicant is responsible for those, and there is a process for remedying those in the event that one is raised. It is enforceable as a legal document, as a civil document. It's an obligation, basically obligates the applicant to perform the improvements in accordance with the approval, requires a notification of the town prior to development, specifies that the applicant is responsible for removing waste from the site generated by construction, requires payment of all fees such as building permit fees prior to construction, agrees that if the agreement is violated, the applicant will it deals with court fees in the event that there's a violation. It is binding on the applicant or a subsequent owner, and it is severable. So those are the severability, meaning if one part of it is deemed invalid, the rest of it still stands. So this is basically the template that we use for all developments. I don't know if there's any.
I have a question.
Yes.
And we don't do too many conditional use permits
Correct.
on this board. And I'm curious about what is generally considered best practice or typical practice insofar as a conditional use permit is somewhere in between a site plan and just a building permit. And like for a building permit, we wouldn't necessarily do a development agreement.
Yep.
For a site plan, we typically do. And this is kind of somewhere in that gray area in between. And I'm wondering if you know anything about like typical or best practices in towns that do more of these.
Yeah, so I don't, as a that's the short answer. And certainly in Plymouth, we don't have precedent. This is the first time we're doing one of these, so we can't exactly say this is what the planning board has done historically. The planning board certainly has the right to ask for one. However, you're correct that typically they are more commonly applied to larger scale commercial developments or subdivisions. So it's,
and in some ways is similar to a subdivision without actually subdividing, in terms of like the kind of build out we're talking about. So if this was a subdivision or a condo development, would we be asking for a development agreement?
I would certainly
Recommended?
have recommended that if it
Okay.
were one. It is, of course, as you acknowledge, a different type of approval.
Yep.
It is somewhat of a streamlined process,
Yeah.
I would say. So it's ultimately up to the board. There's no obligation per se to require one of these, but it does outline clearly who's responsible for various things. It clarifies that, you know, these are the conditions placed by the board, and it really also obtains some documentation on the town's end that the applicant has accepted the responsibilities that come with the planning board approval, which, again, for a big commercial development is pretty important. For a single-family home, not that important. And many of these things are true independently of this document. I mean, if someone causes damage to an adjacent property, that property owner, of course, has separate civil recourse that may or may not be appropriate, but this just kind of consolidates that all into one document. Really up to the board. I would say it's totally up to the discretion of the board, honestly. It wouldn't be a grave issue if we didn't have one.
Okay.
Seems like given the intent of streamlining, not doing it makes sense, but it's also, we're in gray area here.
I feel comfortable either way, honestly.
I'm torn because I too feel comfortable either way. You know, I do see the protection of it, but I don't.
And I think you're right, though. Most of what we're talking about, not all of it, a lot of it would be in place anyway civilly. without disagreement. There are a few things about like materials and stuff from construction that would not be, but a lot of it would be. Do you have any, would you be concerned with doing a development agreement?
Well, let me just speak to what you just said, but like removing the, I think in one way or another, all of those things are generally dealt with. I mean, you just spoke to like removal from material. The building inspector, you know, is charged with dealing with that stuff.
Yeah.
So between the building inspector and the plumbing inspector and the, you know, and the sewer and water inspector and what would be the major issue thing is that most of that stuff is gonna be covered in your approval.
Yeah.
So to some degree, a development agreement is redundant. But again, I agree with Joseph, it's, you know, obviously it's your decision.
And it is,
I just don't see that there's a whole lot of value to it, but.
and it is, as you mentioned, Zach, meant to be a streamlined process, so.
I'm okay with not having
Yeah,
it. I don't
I'm okay
mind.
as well.
Okay. We'll move forward without the development.
Just thought
agreement.
I'd bring it up.
Great conversation though, because it's,
Well, we don't know. It's a gray area.
Gray.
So
So, yeah.
hopefully this will come
Setting
up
some
again and
precedent.
we'll know what to do. Sorry, it's on you, but.
Another condition we need is to have that easement on Page Street for
Snow.
snow, turnaround for the plow.
And in addition to the revocation, there is also the merging of the properties. All necessary permits are obtained.
The easement, the applicant shall offer the town of Plymouth Select Board an easement suitable to accommodate the turning movements of the highway department vehicles at the end of Page Street.
Is that everything?
That's everything I have.
I believe so.
Yeah. Want to call that a motion?
I don't even know if I have the verbiage. I move to approve the conditional use permit of the applicant with the conditions noted earlier in our conversation.
Sort of reiterate.
That works for me.
That works.
Work for you, Joseph?
Yeah, that's fine. That's actually, the zoning board of adjustment does that on occasion. They all agree on conditions and then they motion. I mean, it's, that's a valid way to do
I
that.
will second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Just making sure there's no conditions left behind. All in favor?
I
I just want to let you know I'm here.
Hi, Neil.
I've been here since 6:30,
Oh?
but I came in the wrong way and I couldn't get unmuted. I had to start over.
Welcome.
All opposed? Abstentions? The conditional use permit is approved with the conditions as noted. Thank you very much.
And wait, but we have another,
Oh, yeah, we
oh,
have
yeah.
so many.
Thank you very much. Please be seated.
not done.
Please be seated.
Next.
Hopefully the second piece will take it
Be a
off.
little faster.
Yes, yes, yes. Moving on to the request for revocation of boundary line adjustment by BICO LLC. We did discuss this previously. Any questions, comments, concerns? Joseph, do you have a synopsis of anything we should be looking at?
Sure, yeah, I'll just give a very brief commentary on that. So the, one of the conditions that you've now placed on that prior approval was for the applicant to obtain a revocation of the previously approved boundary line adjustment. So a little bit of background, this was approved in 2023 as a part of the package of applications that related to the self-storage facility. The plan was then subsequently recorded at the Grafton County Registry of Deeds, plan number 16686. There is a state statute, RSA 6764A, which allows the planning board to revoke a previously approved and recorded plan, provided they do so for a lawful reason and follow the process outlined in the statute. So we have noticed a public hearing for this as well. And then even if the board were to approve at this public hearing of the revocation, the revocation itself couldn't be recorded until after 30 days had elapsed since the approval, because basically it's preserving that appeal period. Generally, when there are a few reasons why a revocation can be undertaken, and some of them are more adversarial, but one of the legitimate reasons is at the request of the applicant. So that's really the easy reason to do one. But if there was a failure to follow through with some requirement that the board had imposed, the board could do a revocation that may be more important to preserve that appeal period. But even still, we can't record the notice, even if the board approves it tonight, until after 30 days, in case anybody were to appeal. But yeah, basically, as long as the board is doing it for a legitimate reason, as outlined, one of the 4 reasons outlined in statute and outlined on the request for revocation, basically that form, if approved by the board, would be signed by the chair and then recorded at the Registry of Deeds. This would revert the lots to their pre-2023 configuration. So the applicant has provided both of those plans in the packet, and essentially it would restore the tail, as it were, from the property furthest to the west. I think it's parcel 32 over to Crescent Street, and then it would also reconfigure parcels 30 and 31, which are also on the other side of Page Street and on Crescent Street. So as long as the board is acting in accordance with the aforementioned RSA and doing a revocation for a legitimate reason after holding a public hearing, the board can vote to revoke if the board is inclined to do so for the legitimate reason of the request of the applicant, and revert the lots to their prior configuration.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments on this? It seems pretty straightforward.
And then after the 30 days, they can also do the merger.
Yep, once the boundary line adjustment has been, theoretically they could merge before, but if they merged the lots before the revocation was filed, they would actually be merging not what they want to merge, essentially. So if they want to merge the lot with the tail, that would have to be after the revocation is filed. But that merger form, as was mentioned, is an administrative form that can be filled out and notarized by the property owner. They provide a couple of documents, consent of any mortgage holder, and also the deeds showing the exact same ownership information for all properties. And then once that's filed, we just certify that we've received it with the necessary information and send it to the registry. No new plan is required for a voluntary merger.
I don't have much discussion with this, as it's being requested by the applicant. If no one is here, does the applicant have anything to say before we open it up for a public hearing? All right.
Joseph has done all of our work for us.
Excellent, thank you. It is 8:08, and I'll open this up for a public hearing. Any members of the public would like to speak upon this, please come up to the microphone. And it is 8:08, and I will close the public hearing. This seems pretty straightforward, as, like I said, it's at the request.
Finding of fact, the applicant wants this, unless they tell us otherwise right now.
Yeah, it's on the request of the applicant.
Otherwise.
Not affecting anybody.
All right, well, if we have a motion on the table,
No.
or if anyone would like to motion.
I make the motion that we request the revocation of boundary line adjustment by VICO.
I second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
That was in favor.
We'll go back to that. Abstentions? Neil, that was in favor, correct?
That's right.
Thank you very much. All right, that passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, yeah.
And best of luck. I look forward to more housing.
create some thunder.
Sorry I couldn't meet with you guys the other night.
You wanted to roll them or not? Yeah, I'm gonna roll it. I got a rubber band.
So, oh yeah, yeah. Okay. My brain's melting. I was like, wait, do we have to merge them now? Literally, we just talked about that. No, we don't have to.
Let me show.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our favorite small business owners? Tablet phone.
Okay. Let's move on to the site plan review application for the accessory solar array at Pine Gate Cooperative. We had an application from Carlson Swafford for Pine Gate Cooperative to develop a 92.4 kilowatt accessory community solar array serving the Pine Gate Cooperative Mobile Home Park. The array would be located at 52 Beach Hill Road on parcel 208-065, which has since been merged with parcels 208-067 and 208-068, also owned by Pine Gate Cooperative. Welcome back. It has not been too long since we've seen you last.
A month.
All right.
Fancy paper.
Do you want to run this through your project quickly, briefly?
Sure. Thank you for having me back. Carlson Swafford with the Energy Institute at Vermont Law and Graduate School for Pine Gate Cooperative. With me today, Carrie Blecker, Elise Forster from Rock, New Hampshire, and Ted Van Zant with Barrington Power. Today we're here for our site plan review for, as you said, the 92.4 kilowatt array, community-owned solar array providing benefits to the Pine Gate Cooperative members and Plymouth residents. After our informal consultation at your last public meeting, I was able to confirm with Ted that the steel used on this array is in fact hot dipped galvanized and not painted steel. Wanted to address the application and answer any questions, and then hand things over to Ted to address any questions about the design of the site. I'd like to point to the staff report, which indicated there were no departmental concerns. But I would flag three things. First, that we did have the special exception granted from the zone of boarding adjustment in their last public hearing for the accessory structures in excess of 3, as well as the fence with a height in excess of 6 feet, as this plan calls for a fence with a height of 8 feet. I also wanted to note that I could have been more precise in 2 of my requests for waivers. On waiver request number 14, location of existing and proposed on-site wells showing a 75-foot protection radius. I initially looked at the on-site wells for the tract where the array will be located. My colleague Carrie did a more extensive dive into the well inventory with the New Hampshire Department of Environment and found within 600 feet on now the merged parcels a well existing on that larger parcel. So I did want to raise that. It's well in excess of the 75-foot protection radius, but I did want to raise that that issue. I also wanted to raise on number 18 of existing or proposed easements, deed restrictions or covenants in relevant part to Tract 2 that the New Hampshire Electric Cooperative and the New Hampshire telephone company have an easement along Beach Hill Road, which is essentially coterminous with the 30-foot setback. And seeing as New Hampshire Electric Cooperative is party to the interconnection agreement for this, they will be involved in approving the project as well. And so I just wanted to raise those issues. But I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has at this time.
Great, thank you. If the board would like to review the application, we can look at its completeness in preparation for acceptance. Thank you for pointing out those waivers and the clarity of them.
I was going to state I'm happy to see more residentially related projects and for sustainable energy as well. And a rock project is awesome. And
Noted.
yeah.
I think the requests for the waivers that were on here were all reasonable and within line with the scope of the project.
I would agree.
Are there any requested waivers that make anyone concerned to not accept this? And if so, we can put it to a vote.
I move we accept the application as complete.
Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions. Neil's internet speed is increasing. All right, excellent. We have accepted the application. We'll look on the approval of it. This is all pretty straightforward.
All of these.
Oh, there's Neil. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns in regards to this application? No?
No, sir?
Any other comments you'd like to share with us at all? You mentioned Ted might want to speak upon this.
I could talk all day about this, but you guys probably know.
I think it seems pretty straightforward, and when Carlson came forward to do his conceptual with us, it was very thorough and answered a lot of questions at that time.
As expected. Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing is that we're gonna have to remove some trees, obviously, to put the array where the trees are now. And we're gonna do our best to keep a line of trees between the array and the road for visuals. And other than that, it's gonna look similar with the same kind of fence as the array we built over by the airport for the town. Same technology, same fence, same panels. It's really gonna look the same. So, and it's probably gonna be pretty well tucked in there, so it's not gonna be too visible to anybody but the people driving by for a few minutes.
Yep, yeah. Bradford?
Just a question, where's this power going to? What's the idea of having it there? What does it serve the people? I mean,
Well, sure.
I'm curious where all of them actually go to. Do they get fed back into electric companies? Do some people have them go to the houses? Does it go to Connecticut?
Goes to Rhode Island. No, it goes back into the grid. 100% of it goes back into the grid, and that all the energy then generates a credit. That dollar credit, it gets allocated to the, there you go, you can take over from here.
The cooperative. Because the New Hampshire Electric Cooperative is not required by statute to provide on-bill crediting, like investor-owned utilities, the cooperative is selling 100% of the electricity, and then at the end of the month, New Hampshire Electric Cooperative is paying Pine Gate Cooperative for the electricity they generate.
Barrington Power own that parcel, do they own it? Is that leased to, they rent it, that's how that works?
No, we're just a contractor to the community.
Oh, I see, so that's, someone else owns that land it's on, is that?
Pine Gate owns the land, and
So then every individual household will get, who chooses to participate in the program,
Oh, I see,
will
yeah.
get a lot rent reduction. So it will impact every single,
Excuse me, if you don't mind stepping to the microphone. Thank you. I forgot Neil can't hear you.
So every household that chooses to participate will get a reduction each month based on the amount of electricity that was produced. So that's money in their pockets.
Is it in the area of the, where the panels are? Is that how it works, or for as far as getting?
It's so
Pine Gate.
Brad, Pine Gate is a development that it's all of the houses that are in that. It's all on
okay,
one
I see what
lot
you're
of
saying,
land.
There's 32 homes in the park.
Okay, I follow you now.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
But in terms of who actually consumes the electricity, it's a little less clear. Right?
Yeah,
Because it goes
That's,
back on.
that was one of
Yeah,
your
they're
original
selling
questions.
the
It
electricity.
just goes,
that's what I was wondering.
Yes.
Who gets the, you know,
So this is the 4th time we're doing this kind of model. Sometimes the co-ops will offset their individual electricity use. In this scenario, they're just selling all of it and then just getting money back.
it gets dispersed into the pool of the electricity, if you will.
I see. No, I didn't realize that had to do with those houses a lot. I was just curious where I was going, out of curiosity.
Definitely don't do that.
I have a question. How are they gonna amortize the installation of this array? Would it be a grant?
yes, the project is 100% grant funded by the New Hampshire Department of Energy's. They put out a request for proposal annually for low and moderate income residential community solar projects. This project was selected last year to receive $400,000 to construct this array. So when the array is energized, it will transfer ownership from Barrington Power to Pine Gate Cooperative at no upfront cost to the members of the cooperative. The operations and maintenance of the array is built into the model of the group net metering agreement between the members of the cooperative who elect to be part of the agreement and the host, which is the co-op itself, the Pine Gate Cooperative itself.
Thank you.
Can I have some, sorry, can I have some help remembering when we were looking at just the kind of preview plan? We were discussing whether it would need to have site plan review or not, right? Was that one of the conversations that we had or not? I'm trying to
Yes.
remember.
Whether it needs a site plan review and whether, and it was partially about
Number of structures.
and coverage from them and.
Impervious surfaces.
Impervious, yeah.
Was it not, sorry?
No, continue.
Right, disturbed area.
I can't remember if it was clear that we needed to have site plan review or not.
Before we made, and Joseph, correct me if I'm wrong, before we even made the determination to
Yeah.
get back to them with it, they came forward with a site.
Oh, I see, okay. Thank you.
So somewhat voluntarily
Yeah,
before
okay.
it was asked.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, if there are no other questions upon the application, we'll move on to finding of facts in preparation for approval.
Can I just ask one question of Joseph, perhaps? Were there any issues that came up to be addressed that might inform our discussion? I imagine probably not, in the ZBA approval?
Yeah, the only issue raised in the ZBA approval was a condition placed upon with regards to the access trail, as I believe it's labeled on the plan, which is the driveway to the panels and does extend back into the main Pine Gate parcel that is about 10 feet in width. It's not a very big road, and it's actually not a designated road. There was a concern raised by an abutter about increased traffic if that were to become a through street serving Pine Gate as a whole. The applicant at that time represented that that was not the intention. It was for maintenance of the array. So the condition of approval placed by the zoning board on the special exception was that the driveway or the access drive in its current location should be limited to access to and maintenance of the solar panels, with the recognition that the abutter had asked if it were to be used for more of a through street, that it be relocated further from the shared property line.
Will they be using that access road to build it? So there will be, during construction, there will be quite a bit of traffic.
Not long term.
No.
Not very much traffic. It's not a very big array, so there'll be a couple pickup trucks for several weeks.
Thank you. I think as long as they can leave as much of a buffer around it, I know you have to remove some trees, but if you can leave whatever possible for a
Every
buffer.
possible tree.
As a finding of fact, the plan meets necessary setbacks.
Thank you.
The plan has, sorry, Sue, the plan has gotten a special exception from the zoning board of adjustment for the fence and for number of structures. Thank you.
All of the requested waivers made sense and were reasonable. Does not require water and sewer.
Would the applicant be willing to execute a development agreement with the town before moving forward with this?
Yeah, I would need to discuss that, I think, with my client. I think from what I heard with the previous applicant, it sounded mostly like a memorandum of understanding. Is that?
Joseph, that's correct, pretty much.
Yeah, it includes basically a clear outline of roles and responsibilities for various eventualities and the responsibility for complying with the plan as approved, complying with conditions, that sort of thing.
Essentially just distilling the language of it. Yeah, yes.
All right, yeah, very much so, yeah.
And there wouldn't be any money in escrow for this, probably? No.
I don't envision any being necessary, obviously the decision of the board, but I
Probably not,
wouldn't
yeah.
envision that being necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Is this something that the fire department chief or whoever has to go out and look at to get their blessing?
I think we have no concerns from fire department
Great,
on here. Yeah.
great.
Any other finding of facts?
They
Joseph?
likely will, to that comment, they likely will need a building permit at least, so that would be, I don't know that, the building inspector at least would need to review those.
A finding of fact, no issues came up in departmental review.
Very big finding of facts.
Good
so-
finding of facts.
No. I'm great. So, a couple conditions. Like we just discussed, prior to the start of development, the applicant shall execute a development agreement with the town. And then, second condition, the applicant shall obtain all necessary permits prior to development.
So, I move we approve this. Did we have a public hearing? We did, or didn't?
We did not. Thank you. We did not. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Before moving forward, I'll open this up for a public hearing at 8:29.
Good call.
If there are any members of the public who would wish to speak upon this application, please step forward. Yes, thank you.
My name's Elaine Belkis. I live on Beach Hill Road across the street. How big of an area is this going to encompass? How many panels are here? In relation to the one at the airport.
And let's please keep conversation at the microphone. Okay.
Okay.
Would you like would you like a map?
Would you like a map of it?
Oh, okay, yes, I'd love
You
that.
approach
You
here.
can take a big set right here.
Thank you.
Oh, there's a big.
Here's a full set for you right here. And please speak into the microphone.
So we can hear you.
That's it, that's all I want.
There you go.
That was easy.
Did you have an answer to that question? I didn't hear it, roughly. I'm sorry?
The size of the array is approximately a third of the size, a third to a half the size. Is it 140 kW or is it 100? I don't know, 130 kW? Yeah. Okay, so about a third of the size of the array at the airport.
Next to the airport. That gives everyone an idea. Thank you. Appreciate that.
That's, yeah, well.
All right.
Scale to measure it on.
How many bananas is that?
Well, if there's no other comments or questions or concerns from the public, I will close the public hearing at 8:31.
I will make a motion, if you're accepting one. No?
Neil, any comments before we move forward?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I will make a motion that we conditionally approve this application with the conditions that we have a development agreement between the developer and the town, and that the applicant obtain all necessary permits prior to development.
Second.
Excellent. We have a motion and a second for approval with stated conditions. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Excellent. Congratulations. You're moving forward.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Why do I have,
Thank you.
And Grace, good luck. And
Why
Tony,
don't-
good luck.
why do I have all of this?
Tell me.
I have to ask Joseph that.
Thorough with you.
I guess. Why do I have all these
Just the packet.
property? Why are these in the packet?
They provided the abutting property owner.
Oh, I see.
property
Wow.
owner
Okay.
Letter information.
On the site.
Thank you.
That's what I thought it was.
And we're welcome.
How we do this? Bring one little question pump.
No, just how they outline
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Going out.
side
It's
gig.
the packet, he said.
All right. Moving on to item number 6 on our agenda, informational and pre-application reviews. Joseph, do you have any comments on this?
I have not received any informational or pre-application reviews. We did have Richard Gowan last time, but nobody since then.
Okay, perfect.
The room is emptying out.
Yes. Any other business? Anyone on the board? Joseph?
Well, no.
I don't have,
Let me show you the stack of papers.
I don't have any other business on my end.
All right. Zach, any business from the select board we should be aware of? No? All right. Public comments? No public. We'll check number 8 off. All right, number 9.
I make a motion to adjourn?
Second it.
No, please, public comments.
I just want to, on the question of disturbed area, I did some background research, which I'm happy to send to Joseph if it's useful. But the National Renewable Energy Laboratory had some guidance. They were talking typically measuring the disturbed area as the panels plus the space between them. Was kind of
Well,
Excellent.
We were asking about that, so that's
true,
good,
we
good to
were.
know for going forward.
yeah. I wanted to say, oh man, the purpose is permeability, so we should only count the posts, but so.
So it is the surface.
It depends who you ask actually, but
Oh.
but NREL says it's
Okay.
yeah.
And then we start to deal with the angle they're put at, because that might also.
Yeah.
All right, excellent.
What is the construction schedule?
We should be in May next month. Be clearing trees, and then he's already ordered the long lead materials, Originally, it was scheduled for completion in October. I don't know how tariffs or anything like that has impacted that schedule, but I'm happy to report back on that.
No concern about your grant?
No, no, that's state money.
Yeah, no concern about your grant?
Vermont State.
Good luck.
Excellent, thank you, Mr. Swafford. Good luck with your project.
I do have 2 question comments. I'm
Please.
so sorry.
Please. I'm sorry, for Mr. Swafford? or-
Not for you, no, for the board.
You may stay, but you don't need to, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swafford. My question about landscaping in the CUP.
Landscaping buffer.
Yeah. Do you remember what the intention was of the board in that language? Were you imagining greenery, or were you imagining fences being?
Landscaping buffer along the perimeter.
I imagine.
And intra.
It does not discuss intra.
It did though. Internal landscaping.
It does.
Yeah.
I think it was really dependent on what it was going to be.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of the consensus.
What that particular development was going to be?
Yeah.
Okay.
On the one hand, we often are looking for landscaping, like in site plans and stuff like that.
Landscaping meaning
And then we actually want a
Meaning
landscaping
plants.
plan.
Greenery, right.
greenery.
In this case, I would say, given the amount of space and all,
Uh-huh.
maybe the fence worked out. The abutters seem to be okay with that.
Okay.
And it is supposed to be a more streamlined process.
Yeah.
That's
And
another
at
one
the
of those
same
gray
time,
areas.
and at the same time,
Yes.
we did ask for a landscaping, not plan, but some suggestion that there would be
That
some.
there would be something. Yeah.
And sometimes being vague is good, sometimes being vague is bad.
Yeah.
And
That's why I just wanted to pick your brains for like what
yeah,
your interpretations of that would be, and
I think context dependent is probably.
context is the answer. Okay.
I think maybe orderly separations is kind of the more key, like one of the key phrases in there, which they definitely had achieved.
Yeah.
Yes. The other question I had about the CUP was if, I don't think it's like a problem with this particular application we saw tonight, but any timelines for building, if we want to set those for people, if this effort comes up again, we'll see.
I have something.
Neil?
Please, Neil.
Regarding the BICO development, which was approved tonight, I think we should ask our town engineer, when he reviews the plans for drainage, to pay close attention to the soil testing on that site. That could make a big difference as to whether or not the neighbors do have water piping through into their cellar.
And that's something we would expect to see on the drainage plan, correct? We would expect to see those.
That's
soils.
right, right. The soil testing is the most important part of the design.
Because it allows the permeability of water to.
Well, fluctuating water table.
Okay.
If they have ground treatment and they go into the fluctuating water table, that would negate the effect of the drainage,
It's good to have this
and it
conversation.
would push water onto the neighbor. But the development is going to increase the impervious surface of the area where they are. So that would create a concentrated flow. I just wanted to, have you remind the engineer to pay close attention to the soils.
Joseph, can you remind the engineer?
I think he heard me probably.
Not here. They all left.
Yeah, no, I'll
Thank you,
definitely
Neil.
note that. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
I tried to jump in earlier, but I came in the wrong way and I couldn't say anything. I couldn't unmute myself. So I had to back out and come in by a different method in order to be able to participate.
Glad you're here.
Thank you.
This is my first meeting as a new member.
Oh, yes, welcome back as a new member, Neil. That is correct. Well, any other comments? I believe there's a motion on the floor.
I once again second. Oh, I move to adjourn again.
Okay.
Once more, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning this meeting for the night?
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed?
Nay.
Thank you very much from the
Bye,
select board.
Zach.
Somebody's gotta do it.
Extensions. Thank you.